Hey, Jamie.
Hey, Jeff.
It's on you, it's all on me. Can't you see? It's on you, it's all on me. You and me, can't you? It's on you, it's on me.
Hey, Craig. Right or wrong, we don't care. Win or lose, we don't care. We don't care. We don't care.
That's right. We don't care. Hi, Jamie.
Hello.
We're going to try this again. We already tried this once, and then our network didn't really want to do its thing. So I guess we'll see. All right, well, welcome back to Podcast versus Everyone. My name is Jeff Nusser. I am one of the hosts here. With me is my friend Jamie Vinnick from CougFan.com. How you doing, Jamie?
Another day in paradise. I'll use the same intro as I did the first time we tried to record.
Yeah, there we go. No, and I'll be like, just like I did before, hey, it's paradise. You live in Pullman. Like, we'll just kind of do the whole thing again.
The whole shtick.
We'll just kind of repeat the whole thing.
The whole schmear.
Jamie, of course, standing in for my regular co-host, Craig, still taking some time off. So hugely appreciate Jamie joining us again. Just want to remind you of a couple of quick things that are available to you. First of all, if you're listening to this on podcast, also we have this on YouTube, Podcast VS Everyone. At YouTube, you can watch us if you want to see our faces, if you want to see our lovely bearded faces and see our backgrounds from our homes. If you've ever wondered what my basement looks like, you can get a sense of that. If you also are interested in the podcast in terms of other things we might do writing wise, you can subscribe to the newsletter at podcastvseveryone.com. I do write up some things and send them out from time to time. So if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll get that, as well as alerts to new podcasts. And then since it costs money to keep this whole thing rolling, we got to pay for all the services that we use to house all this stuff. There are premium memberships available to you if you'd like to support the podcast. The biggest thing that gets you is access to our members only Slack. I hang out there. Jamie hangs out there. Craig hangs out there. And about 100 other people hang out in there just talking about the Cougs and sharing things and, just doing the things that fans do. We'd like overreacting and bitching and complaining. Like, we're really good at that kind of stuff, just like everybody else. So
we're providing a lot of material too.
That is true. That is true. We do. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that in just a sec. Annual memberships start at just a little over $4 a month, $50 a year. You can join us there. One perk that you'll get is that this year our bracket contest, I'm going to just restrict it to the folks who are premium members. I'll offer the same thing offered last year, which is the winner of the contest. I'll send them a home field apparel T-shirt of their choosing. I assume they'll choose one of the WSU shirts, but just in case. I suppose you could choose something else. That would be weird, but I guess you could do it. So yeah, join us there. Come into our bracket contest and see if you can win the home field apparel shirt. Obviously the Cougs not in the NCAA tournament this year. After being in it last year and after waiting so long for that return. However, the Cougs keep their postseason streak alive. Both programs do, which is kind of wild. So this is number 4 for the men, right? 4 years in a row for the men. 5 years in a row for the women, which, to be honest, given the history of both of these programs, is a pretty awesome achievement. Now, the men are in something called the College Basketball Crown, which is I'm trying to think of how to describe it. Jamie, do you have a good way to describe this tournament?
It's 16 teams, and it's a couple of 3 or 4 non-Power 5 teams, a couple of okay Power 5 teams, and then some really not very good Power 5 teams. Colorado's in won 3 games in conference play. So, somehow Washington still didn't get into a postseason tournament, but
yeah, this was a creation of Fox, And then I think, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it certainly seems like it was geared toward, really just finding a landing spot for Big Ten, Big 12, Big East teams, which those are the three conferences that Fox broadcasts. And so that's, most of the field is made up of those guys.
Yeah, it was basically the 6 spots went to those conferences. 2 from each conference were guaranteed to those. And then, essentially you've got 1 American team, 1 Atlantic 10, 2 WCC and a Mountain West, and everything else is the Big 12, the Big East, and the Big 10. And, like we kind of mentioned, that includes some not great teams. Now, the nice thing for the Cougars is there's still, a little bit of, some of these teams still have some name value behind them. Like, I'm sure we'll get into it in a second. Like, you play Georgetown. Yeah, it's been a long time since Georgetown was, Georgetown, but it still carries the name Georgetown. Like, still.
Yeah, I mean, these, the guys who play on the team now might be a little on the young side for remembering Georgetown as Georgetown the way that maybe you and I do, but especially me, right? Because I, grew up in the 80s and all that stuff. But yeah, it's as I'm looking here, I count. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Big 12 teams, and then I think 1, 2 Big 10, and it looks like 3 Big East, and then the rest is
5. I got 5 Big 12, 4 Big East,
5 Big 12. Okay, there we go.
So it's it's a lot of again, it's a lot of the bottom of the leagues. I mean, Colorado won 3 conference games and they're playing. I mean, good for Andre Akamovsky. He gets a couple more games, but
yeah,
Colorado was not a good team this year. But it's an opportunity. Hey, Fox is great. We can broadcast more of their games. And for Colorado, it's great. Let's play a few more games. For a younger roster.
Well, and I think that's kind of like the big question that gets asked, right? Like, why even do this, right? And I mean, this happens during football bowl season too, where people are like, "Oh, there's too many bowl games. There's too many bowl games," and I'm like, man, I am of the opinion there's kind of no such thing as too much sports. So
yeah,
for me, it doesn't bug me, but I do want to. Not doesn't bug me. Like more sports is great. So, I do want to kind of maybe go down the road though, like what the value is we think for the team to keep participating. So, like, for example, with the men, obviously, I mean, we're well aware of the way the season ended, got off to such a, promising start. We were kind of, dreaming big, thinking about, what this team might be able to do, maybe even get into the NCAA tournament again. And then, of course, they crash, for basically a month and a half. They just kind of fall off the face of the earth. And then, they recovered a bit at the end and won some games and looked pretty okay doing it. And, and then eventually, lost out to, San Francisco again, which we haven't talked about that since that game happened. But, just, broad strokes, they played pretty okay in the first half, kind of didn't play as good in the second half, got, missed some opportunities early to kind of maybe put some distance between them and the Dons. And then, of course, a backup point guard decided to, score 50 points or whatever it was. So, it was not like the most ceremonious exit, but I will say this, and I I'm curious about your thoughts on this. I really thought, even though, they did lose to San Francisco, which was a bummer, I didn't think there was anything embarrassing about it or anything that you would be like, oh yeah, that's, man, I just can't even, like, I don't know. I mean, we went through 6 weeks of embarrassing play, right? That game wasn't that. I really felt like the last 4 games of the season, the team, really kind of, essentially grabbed back some of the narrative from the negative vibes. And I felt pretty good about the way they finished up. And I felt like they had, that they should feel positive about the way it ended, which is part of why I think I'm kind of, I mean, I don't know if excited is the right word, but I'm definitely like glad that they're still getting to play.
Yeah, I think the one thing that obviously will stand out from the San Francisco game is the rebounding, but Washington was a bad rebounding team this year. Like, that wasn't it's not
that
like
was not
all
new.
of a sudden the Cougs were just like, this glass cleaning team, like they got crushed on the glass all year. And Dane Erickstrup, who isn't a great rebounder, but is 6'11", plays 9 minutes. Like, so there were some factors involved in that. And then, Ryan Beasley has the game of his life. And yes, it was tiring to see guys do that, but he's also a good player that's just been behind two really good guards. I think we got our hopes up as Cougs because there was no Marcus Williams. It did seem like a very winnable game. But San Francisco is a good team. This was not a one-man. This was not a one-horse, a one-trick pony. Williams maybe was their best player, but Malik Thomas was an all-conference player, like first-team all-conference.
Yep.
Like, I think Tyrone Riley's going to have a chance to be a superstar, just with his athleticism, his length, and his stroke. For whatever reason, just seemed completely unable to guard Barry Wang in the 3 games they played against him. And San Francisco's huge. Like, it's funny, like, they aren't a great rebounding team. And then you look at, like, their average height and it's low, but that's largely because Beasley's small and Williams is small. But, like, Lingard's 7 feet. They bring in Giga Berry off the bench, and he has 7 rebounds in 5 minutes. Well, he's 7'2". Like, they don't have someone to body him. The O'Donnell guy's 6'9". Wang's 6'9" and is an aggressive rebounder. I mean, he was... he had an offensive rebounding rate of 8.2, which, it's ranked in the country. That's what you should...
It's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, like, they're a good team, and I think, again, there were circumstances. Dane plays 9 minutes. Like, obviously, as we've kind of found out now, Isaiah was going through some stuff, with the passing. I'm guessing at that point, just based off what Riley had said and the fact that he wasn't available for media, I'm guessing they kind of knew what was on the horizon. And, and Zay's such an emotional player that it doesn't surprise me that he would be affected by something like that, especially with how close him and Slick were. Obviously, just terrible that he passed and feel terrible for Zay. But, so you were almost operating in that sense without 2 of your starters because Dane plays 9 minutes and Zay's understandably his mind is elsewhere. I mean,
somewhere else.
I don't think you can fault him for that at all. Yeah. And then it's just like, San Francisco's a good team. Like they won 24 games this year. They beat Boise State. They beat St. Mary's. They're good. The only thing that holds them back is they don't know how to beat Gonzaga.
Yeah, they can't. Like they can't beat Gonzaga. They can't. They can't even really be competitive with Gonzaga. Apparently.
Oh, it's remarkable. I think it's now like I forget how many straight years since they've beaten them. They're 24-6 outside of Gonzaga, and then the Zags every game 11 points, 20 points, 9. Like,
for WSU fans of a certain age. For Cougar fans of a certain age, it will remind you of WSU playing, Arizona and UCLA especially, over the years up until, the last, 6-7 years.
Until I think it was the Kyle's second year they finally beat SC after it was like 10 years or something since they had beaten SC.
I just remember UCLA was crazy. Like it was.
Well, yeah. But
it was insane. Or the women's team against Stanford. That's another way to put it. Like,
right?
That is
the
that's the gold standard for being unable to even compete. They played. They really did. They played hard. They played their butts off. They were competitive. They certainly did not. It was not a no-show, right? Like they may have gotten beat on the glass. They may have had their issues, but they certainly showed up. And they certainly tried, and they just didn't play great. They make some more shots.
Yeah.
Maybe they have a better chance. They put a little separation in the first half when San Francisco couldn't make a shot at all. Again, maybe that changes. But it didn't, and they lost. But it wasn't a thing where I kind of thought like, oh, man, this is just like such a disaster. I mean, we went through that. So in my mind, because of that, I do think that it is a cool thing that they get to continue the season. And I think that is something, and I think sometimes as fans, we can sort of overvalue our own experience in the equation, right? Where it's like, well, I as a fan am not interested in watching them play any more basketball. Therefore, they should not play any more basketball. And it's like, okay, but we're not the only ones who matter here. There's a whole squad full of players who I'm sure are appreciating the opportunity to, A, play some more games, but B, go to Las Vegas again to do it.
Right.
And it's probably, I mean, if we're just being honest, like the atmosphere is probably going to be a little more relaxed because, somewhat like a bowl game, right? Where, this is the reward, for what they were able to accomplish. And the reality is for us, they did win enough games early in the season to have a record that looked pretty okay. And those games do count. Those games count, even though there were all those games in the middle that really sucked and sort of like changed our whole perception of the trajectory of the team and the program. But, the early season games did happen. The record was what it was. They won, all the games that they won, and that was enough to get them invited to something like this. And so for that, I don't know. I think it's great. I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see for the team. I don't see a downside. I mean, it's first off, they don't play till March 31st.
Yep.
If that helps keep one guy out of the portal, because the portal opens on the 16th. No, yes, the 16th. The 20, whatever. The 20. I think next Monday. It's something like that. Anyways, if that keeps one guy out of the portal, it's a win. It's a chance to how it might seem menial. How much does 5-6 extra practices and one more game help with Thomas Thrasserson or a Reeve Avers or guys who are going to be, you would assume, part of the program going forward? I mean, Thomas and Reeve have said they're staying, and I mean, I don't think they would be particularly sought after NIL guys either. How much does that help them kind of build themselves towards next year? The same way we see it in bowl season, as you mentioned, And then I think there's the other thing that I don't think it's been announced yet, but there's been rumbles and mentions that the winner's going to get some kind of little NIL package. I mean, it's not going to be a ton, but, for a team like Washington State, who is obviously strapped for NIL funds, any cent matters, especially with some of the guys who, hypothetically, you're going to need to try and keep with a little bit of with some dollar signs. But I don't see a downside to it. Like, I get what you said, like, for the fans, but like, it's not about the fans. Like, this, let me rephrase it. In this sense, it's like the program shouldn't care that, the fans didn't enjoy the season much, we should stop. Like, let's look at Kyle Smith's the first NIT year. Like, remember when they went through that stretch where they played like dog water and they
yes, I do,
lost 5 straight and then kind of they won a couple games late in the regular season. They beat Oregon State twice barely, and then they had the fun senior day game against Oregon and then lost to UCLA. But then hey, they go to the NIT Final Four. Like, that was fun. Like, that was more games. The women's team last year had a disappointing end of the season for obvious reasons. You lose Charlize, the season kind of falls apart. And then they go to the final for the WBIT. Like, some of those things are fun. And, it gives you a different memory of that season. You don't think so much about that stretch or, that happened. And then sometimes, you think back to Kyle's next year and the thing you think about is Steel Ventures going for 27 and beating him in the NIT. But, some of those smaller tournaments can have, and I think they can have impacts too. I think, again, they're good for development. I think it was a few years ago, the Arizona women's team won the WNIT, and then the next year was one shot away from winning the national title. Sometimes things like that happen where just those extra few games and, and again, in a time where you're doing everything you possibly can to keep guys in Pullman and try and keep pieces of the roster, this can't be anything but good. Yeah,
can't hurt. So they're going to take on Georgetown. Georgetown, of course, as we alluded to, big heavyweight program in yesteryear, has gone through, some down times recently. You had John Thompson, John Thompson's reign of terror for so long, and then really kind of been in the wilderness mostly since then. There was a brief kind of blip with John Thompson's son, John Thompson III, where they were pretty, actually, I guess it was more than a brief blip.
Yeah, they had about
an 8-year run where they were pretty damn good. Fell off a little bit, went for Patrick Ewing. That did not go great. That experiment turned into a train wreck at the end. And then they went and got Ed Cooley from Providence, which honestly I thought was actually a pretty good stroke of genius. I think Ed Cooley's a really good coach.
I agree.
Yeah, and so he has improved them quite a bit. They were 219 in Ken Palm when Patrick Ewing wrapped up. They improved marginally last year, took a big jump this year up to 87, won 17 games. They have hung their hat on their defense, which is really good. And that is largely why I am actually kind of terrified of the matchup in this game.
Well, that's Ed Cooley's
I,
specialty.
Yeah. And it's not even just that defense is Ed Cooley's specialty. It's the kind of defense that we're talking about here. So let me throw a couple of numbers at you here that have me kind of clenching my butt cheeks, as it were, right now. So kind of here's the biggest one. We all know that WSU turns the ball over at a really, really horrendous rate, right? For the season, it's over 20%, which ranks 340th in Division I. Georgetown, meanwhile, has the 55th ranked defense and adjusted defensive efficiency margin, which is really good. That is fueled largely by turnovers, where they take the ball away almost 20% of the time. So you got two teams. You got the Cougs, who give the ball away at a way above average rate. You got Georgetown, which takes the ball away at a way above average rate. They are 44th in the nation in steal percentage. All of these things pointing toward WSU maybe having a really difficult time holding on to the ball. WSU gets the ball stolen more than just about anybody, 300th nationally in terms of steal rate by opponents. So when I put all that together, I don't know that anything else really super sticks out statistically when we have the ball, but that's really the big one, and I'm not sure. And I guess the other big one is that Georgetown's got a really stellar 2-point defense. And of course our offense is really driven by the 2-pointers that we get. So maybe that's the other piece. But yeah, I mean, they're going to have to hold on to the ball in a way that they don't normally do, for them to have much of a chance here.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, is Georgetown's season follows a lot of the Wazoo blueprint. They were 12-2 and 3-0. And then they just ran into the crucible that was the Big East. And, of course, the difference between that and Wazoo is the Big East was loaded. I mean, literally every single team was in the top 70 or top 80 outside of Georgetown, Providence, and DePaul. I mean, like, Villanova just fired their coach after a bad year, and they were 56th. And, like, Creighton's in the tournament, and UConn in a down year is in the tournament, and Marquette's in the tournament, and St. John's became incredible. Xavier's in the tournament. So it was kind of the similarity. The other thing that worries me is they've got size. Now, Thomas Sorber, who's like their big, absolute, just beast inside, he's missed the last month. I can't imagine they'll bring him back for a college basketball crown game, especially as a freshman. But, Drew Fielder, 6'11", 235, and really good on the glass. And as we know, Wazoo's bigs aren't great on the glass. And that, you look at a guy like him who rebounds a lot. They've got Jordan Burks, who's 6'9", and they got a 7-footer who doesn't play. But, their guards, like, I think it'll be like Mac and Epps will be an interesting matchup for Nate and Isaiah. And then, like, I think Lawan can match up with Micah Peavy, just kind of looking at, again, their base lineup. But then, like, who takes on Fielder? Like, he is too big and strong for probably Ethan or Dane, but he's also tall. I mean, that's what frightens me about the matchup, is it's just they seem to have a kind of an advantage there that I don't know how Wazoo can respond to. Outside of basically force Fielder out of the paint. Although he's a 25% three-point shooter, which means he'll hit 8 threes, and we know how this works.
Yes, we know. It is ordained. It is ordained.
They are not a great shooting team, like 31.8 from three. Like Micah Peavy's a 40% shooter. He's a good. I mean, he was at TCU the last 3 years.
Not a great shooting team.
But the other guys like 32, like Max at 32, Epps is 34. Like Curtis Williams 34, but then Fielders is 25%. Like, they don't shoot a ton of threes. They don't play a lot of their bench, 288th in bench minutes. Most of their points come in the paint. And this is actually interesting. They don't draw a ton of fouls, which does work in Wazoo's favor. Like, only 15% of their points come from the line, partly because they're not free throw shooters. But they only have one guy with over 100 free throw attempts, and that's Sorber, who's again we're assuming not.
And he's not going to play.
No, the next guy is Peavy with 91. I mean, just for reference, the Cougs have two guys with at least 100 between Price and Lawan, and then Dane's got 78 and Nate's got 72, and the Cougs get to the line at a decent rate. It's just they send teams to the line at a really decent rate.
Yeah. Well, and it's, the fact that Georgetown, has pretty good overall offensive rebounding numbers while playing in the Big East is sort of like one of those things where I'm like, it's, the Big East is known, known for being rugged, known for being physical. I don't think even in, in the days since John Thompson, I don't think that has changed all that much. And so as WSU's defensive rebounding goes, we've really seen this. As that goes, their defense goes. And so if they are going to be able to, be tough on the defensive glass, they have a good chance to slow Georgetown down a bit. If they're not, if they're going to do what they've done, pretty often. Now, heading into that San Francisco game, they had really done a better job on the defensive glass, and then San Francisco just kind of went crazy on them. And I almost think, I don't know, San Francisco coming into that game, not a great offensive rebounding team. They were not one of the top offensive rebounding teams in the conference. It seemed like the coach was like, all right, I'm missing Marcus Williams. How do we get an edge? Okay, WSU really sucks at defensive rebounding, man. Let's just turn it loose and go to the glass. And honestly, it seemed like our guys who had fought pretty hard on the defensive glass for the previous few games, it seems like they honestly were taken by surprise. They were not expecting San Francisco to crash quite that hard, and I think that was evidenced a bit by the fact that the second half was very different. The offensive rebounding percentage in the second half was much lower. So I wonder on this one if with the dedicated practice time to knowing that, hey, this is what Georgetown does, and making sure that you're ready for it and ready to fight for it, that's what's going to be required. If they don't offensive rebound, if they don't if they turn the ball over, it's I could easily see this game getting away. I think KenPom's got it at I don't know, Georgetown by 4 or something like that, right? Yeah, he's got Georgetown by 4. Georgetown 63% chance. It was basically a 2-1 chance to win the game based off their rankings. I think we are 124 in his system right now. Georgetown 87. So going to be a tough game no matter what, but it could spiral pretty bad if those two factors get away from them. Let's flip to the women really quick.
One thing I just sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing so I just went and looked. Sorber is out for the year, so they won't be seeing him. And what's interesting is I'm looking at this. If you look at their last few games since he got hurt, they're 2-5, and the offensive rebounding numbers are a lot closer to 18 or 19%, or and there's a couple outliers in there, but they're not rebounding 31% without him. So I do think that's one thing just to, Fielder, I think, still going to be a load on that offensive glass, but a lot of their second chances came through what he was able to do in terms of a 9.7 offensive rebounding rate, which I'd have to imagine, only MD has a higher rate, which is hysterical considering he's got a defensive rebounding rate. But I do think
to that end, by the way, I'll add on to that really quick. Their defense, I'm now looking at their game plan where it kind of shows all their defensive efficiencies. Their defense kind of fell apart too after they lost him.
He was the leader in block rate.
Yeah. So yeah, so you put that together and you go, well, you know, I mean, maybe there's something there. Still forcing a lot of turnovers, but yeah, maybe there's something there where it's like they're not, and their effective field goal percentage against, their 2-point percentage against their last 6 games, they gave up 60% on twos, 68%, 72%, 61%, 58%, 64%. That's pretty bad. So maybe that is a harbinger of good things. Maybe Sorber really is that important to them. The women are headed to the WNIT, which is not to be confused with the WBIT, and the WBIT is more comparable to the men's NIT, with the WNIT, I don't know, being comparable to a very large CBI. I don't know, like
Probably,
maybe that's
yeah.
kind of the level we're talking about here, which is to say, as Jamie and I were talking about before we jumped on and hit record, this is a tournament WSU should fare really well in.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what plagued them this year when you look at their losses. Power teams and the best of the WCC. Like, they just weren't at that level, partly because of their youth, but, you know, you look at who they lost to. I mean, even the not great Power 5 teams, the Texas Techs, the Stanfords, which is bizarre to say, but, you know, Iowa, like, Drake's a good team. Like, they lost to a lot of kind of teams that were just better and older.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know about the older part. I haven't gone through the entire field, but there's only a few teams higher in the net than they are. There's only like 3 top 100 teams. There's only one power team, and it's Rutgers, who won like 11 games. Like, this bodes well for them. I think, especially with how we have seen Cami Etheridge teams perform late in the season, where they get hot at the right time. I think there are certainly some things to like. I mean, here's how you put it into perspective. Wazoo gets the winner of Air Force and Utah Valley. Both teams that are not particularly great. If they win that, then they get one of North Dakota State, who's not great, New Mexico State, who's not great, or Pacific, who they beat 3 times this season.
3 times. Yep.
I mean, they say the hardest thing is to beat a team 3 times. I don't know where 4 falls in, but like Pacific and St. Mary's were like the 6th and 7th teams in the WCC, and like they're in this tournament. Like, those were not very good teams. Like, they had they're not awful. They're not like a joke or anything. Like, you know, they were okay. Like, but like St. Mary's was 14-16 and went 10-10 in the WCC, and like Pacific was 15-18 and went 9-11 in the WCC. Like, Wazoo beat Pacific by 8, by 12, and then by 11, and they didn't play all that well in that first in the WCC tournament. And then they beat St. Mary's by 9, and then by 10. Like, these weren't teams that they like really struggled with, but that's just kind of to give you a feel of what the field looks like. And there are some okay teams. Like, Buffalo won like 25 games. I think the College of Charleston's solid, but it's a lot of 23-win teams in bad conferences that, you know, either won their regular season title and just choked in the conference tournament, or, you know, or there was one team that was ahead of them or something. But there is not like this, oh, that team, you know, like last year in the WBIT, which I think, like you said, is the better tournament. Like, you look at kind of who they were facing, it's okay. You've got like, they faced Illinois in like the Final Four, and like, all right, that's still a Big Ten team. Like, they played Toledo, who was a good team. Who else did they? I think they played Santa Clara, who was, you know, I think won 20. Yeah, Santa Clara won 25 games last year, and you know, Wazoo handled them. Wazoo actually destroyed them, but that's who they were facing. This is a lot lower, and you know, I think for a team this young, this is great. They should be doing this. This is really valuable for all of those freshmen, and for a team that hypothetically could return its entire roster besides Tara. Like, they need these games just for next season, and I think, like I said, I think they've got a chance to. You don't want to say, oh, they should win the tournament, because that puts a lot of, you know, expectation on, but on paper, they should be able to make a nice run.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also worth noting. So 2 things. One, we sort of mentioned earlier, men making 4 consecutive postseason appearances. Now, granted, the postseason opportunities are more than what they were in the past, probably. Same thing on the women's side. But that said, these are two programs that have not typically had like even in an expanded postseason era where they would have gotten any sniff. The men, of course, have had some pretty lean years off and on with some blips of excellence where we're talking NCAA tournament. The women, on the other hand, before Cammie's arrival, man, it was nothing. There was one NCAA tournament appearance. It was, I think, right before I got to school, something like that, like 1991 or something, right? And then it was not just like, oh, they didn't make it to the tournament. I mean, we're talking about one of the worst basketball programs in all of Division I, really, in terms of just how bad it was for how long it was. And so for Cammie to be here and to do what she's done, and I also want to just kind of give some pretty big kudos to Ann McCoy for this one, because look, surely this WNIT is going to cost them money. It is surely going to cost the athletic department some money to host those games, host at least one game, right? And possibly more. When you're talking about, opening up Beasley, hosting a game, all the expenses that go with that. And to be frank, right, not a lot of ticket revenue coming in for women's games, which sucks, but that's the reality that, we're talking about just in terms of the calculus of the dollars, right? And so Ann McCoy said, no, this is worthwhile. This is worthwhile for us to pay for, in contrast to the men, where going to that college basketball crown doesn't cost them any money. That was sort of one of the big, selling points of the college basketball crown is, hey, we're going to fly everybody to Vegas. We're going to put everybody up in Vegas. And then you're going to play, and we'll give some NIL to the winning team or whatever. So that was a big attraction of that tournament, as opposed to, say, the NIT, which, again, is, the financial burden is placed on, mostly on the hosts, but also, if you have to travel, you're picking up all those expenses, whatever. So it's money out of pocket there. So unlike the men, where there's not money out of pocket, the women, Ann McCoy did have to go to bat here and come up with the money to do this. And I think that says a lot about WSU's commitment to women's sports. I think that's part of it. And I think it's WSU's belief in Cammie and what she's doing and what she's building and the value in this, just like what you were talking about. So I am thrilled that Ann McCoy made that step, because she didn't have to.
Are they playing this tournament if Pat Chun's the AD?
Doubtful.
And I think I wrote as much this morning, and Cammie has taught. I mean, every offseason, look, you get to the point where, oh boy, are we going to be able to keep Cammie? Because she's an incredible coach. There's a million jobs in Texas, and I always have said, and I have said since Ann got hired, this makes a difference, because Cammie, first off, Ann cares about women's basketball. Ann puts that on a, I don't want to say she prioritizes it over, but she makes it a point to make sure they are taken care of. Yeah. It was not a priority for Pat Chun. Pat Chun cared about football and men's basketball, and they were good. That was it. I mean, it's well documented, his apathy towards volleyball, and the end result of the Cougs' legendary alumni coach leaves. But I don't think Cammie, they didn't get the same resources that they deserved for how well they were playing. But that's not the case under Ann. Cammie has spoken outwardly many times how much she appreciates Ann, how much she likes Ann. I mean, she was thrilled when Ann got the job. That makes a difference. Especially for someone like Cammie, who at her stage of her career isn't necessarily always just need the best job. She's 60 years old. She's not job hunting to get to the next, if Texas comes open tomorrow, she's offered the job, she's going to go. And she should, but I don't think she's out there just hunting and I've got to get out of here. And I think Ann McCoy's a big part of that. And I think this is one of those things where if someone comes to Cammie with an offer, well, she's like, well, I know that my team is taken care of and and is considered here. And that's
Yep.
always been a big thing for her. She wants her team, which has been the most successful team over the last 5 years at Washington State, without question. She wants them to receive the attention from and the resources that any other team does. And there's obviously, I think she understands that is not a perfect science to it, and football still demands what it demands, but it certainly you can just tell that there's a much better connection between Cammie and the AD office than there was when Chun was here, and I think that's huge to keeping her here. And they, as far as I'm concerned, and I think most people would probably agree with me, is she can coach here as long as she wants. I mean, obviously, outside of something ridiculous, some scandalous thing, which don't see that happening.
No.
Like Cammie should be she should have, and I'm not uncertain that she hasn't been told that or something. Where, yeah, you are welcome. Like, oh no, she missed the tournament back-to-back years. Okay, great.
Yeah,
we want to
lifetime
get
contract.
First off, the funny thing is, that's not good enough for her. She's not saying, "Oh, all right, we had a nice year." Like, that doesn't work for her, which I think is what is. I've talked about it before. The thing that kills me about Cammie is you listen to the first 2 minutes of Cammie Etheridge's press conference without watching the game, and you might not know who won the game. It just depends. But
her standards are very high.
Oh yeah, and when you look at what this program has done, I mean, 3 tournament appearances for this program. I mean, that's unprecedented for any Wazoo basketball program, really, much less the women's team. So, but I do think little things like this, which may seem little, go a long way to keeping her around, to keeping her happy here. And I think for Wazoo to maintain a relevant women's basketball team, and truth be told, the WCC is wide open next year. Like, they have a very good chance to win the conference and then win the conference tournament and go to the tournament. Gonzaga, Portland, and Oregon State are about to get gutted by graduations.
Yep.
You make sure your coach is happy.
Yeah, totally agree. So I'm thrilled that they're doing it. I think it's great. You mentioned all the young players, for people who may not be as familiar with the roster, really just one senior, Tara Wallach, who is fabulous and fantastic. But also so many just really hyper talented young players. One player you mentioned, Diana Mendez, is just like she is an athlete on another plane. We all love Charlize for everything she did, and Charlize is a special basketball player. Mendez, as an athlete, she's on a different level.
It's the type of athlete she reminds me of. This freshman year reminded me of. She's the type of player Stanford brings off the bench when they're up 40 against Wazoo, and it's like, wait, you mean there's more of these?
Yeah, there's more.
You sure?
You're like, come on, man. It's not fair.
Star recruit who hasn't played, who's redshirting, or who's sitting on the bench for Tara. That's what it was watching Mendez, and you just see what it can become, and just I mean, I think, and Cammie said this much after. I think it was the Portland game. Like, sometimes she does stuff. I get mad at her. Like, she had a high turnover rate, which expected. She's a freshman with a ridiculous usage. And then she's like, but then she dribbles through 5 players and finishes at the rim. And I'm like, well, I can't really say anything because I know that's what she's going to be able to do. And I think, and when you look at how players improve in her program, I mean, what she'll be able to do by the time she's a senior, let alone next year, or let me reverse that. What she'll be able to do next year, but let alone when she's a senior, I mean, you're talking a potential WCC Player of the Year, potential All-American candidate with how good she can. I'm not saying right now, but how good she can be.
Yep, and playing in these games, could potentially go a long way. I mean, when you're talking about a player with so much untapped potential, every game potentially makes a difference. So, so that's a good deal. I guess we'll just wrap up really quick by mentioning we would give a spring football update, but there really isn't one to give.
No, they haven't practiced since.
They've been on spring break. They haven't practiced for a week, so really nothing to report there. Other than you mentioned in the Slack that the offensive line is huge. I know we spent a lot of time talking about the offensive line last time we talked about it, but yeah, that's the sort of thing that is like, all right, cool. I like to hear that because we're going to be running the ball a lot and needing to push some people around. So that was cool. But I don't know, man. Any other nuggets to drop? I doubt it.
No, I mean they resume practice tomorrow. It's closed, and then they practice Thursday. It's closed, and then they practice Saturday, and it's open. So
yeah, you'll be able to see
maybe
that
next week when we record. I'll have something to share. But yeah, I mean it's definitely unique. Do I miss not having to get up at 6 a.m.? No. I do not miss that. I am not upset about the fact that I don't have to be up in 8 hours.
Yeah.
For those who are unaware, I am a night owl, not an early bird, and I do not like being up before 9. So the 6 a.m. practices were not my favorite. It actually became a pretty fun running gag between Dickard and I, where I think he pushed him back 5 minutes one spring, and he's like, "I did that just for you, just so you could get those 5 extra minutes of sleep." But no, I mean it's different. But I get why Rodgers is doing it. Keep it, on the down low. Just I think I don't remember if I've said this when we've been recording it, but Jimmy Rodgers closing off 2 days of practice every week summarizes my impressions of Jimmy Rodgers as coach, which is, it just put your head down and let's play football. Like it's nose to the grindstone. We're not trying to. We don't care about the glitz and the glamour and the et cetera. And I get why that can be good, the publicity, but it's the message of, we have one job, it's to win, and if you're not here to help us win, get out.
Yeah. I personally think it's a little silly, but I also won't say that to his face. So.
I get why people are like, okay, is it a big deal? I get that, but I also get from his standpoint, it's just, it just doesn't need to be for him, it doesn't need to be this big thing. And what, he's probably, and who knows, maybe next spring it's open, and this is probably the way he's done stuff in Brookings, and it was just treated a little differently. And I've always said this: if you win, do whatever you want.
It's so true.
It's so true.
I mean, look.
Yeah. You
and I both know that Mike Leach did Mike Leach things, and Mike Leach could get away with a lot of stuff because he did what he did. I mean, look, the reality is that there are so many stories of things that Mike Leach did where you're like, man, a lot of other coaches if Jake Dickert, for example, had done some of those things, I'm not sure that, it would have flown, but it's when you win, your point is taken, right? When you win,
you can show up an hour and a half late to your own press conference.
Your own press conferences, your own practices, your own whatevers.
Leach, and I think, and then also everyone just knew this is what you're dealing with. It wasn't like he pulled it out. You knew when you hired him.
No.
All right, this guy's a little weird.
No, there were no surprises, man. There was nothing there that was surprising. I mean, even you go back to that very first season where damn near people are starting to punch each other out, and he's rolling people in the sand and hosing them down, and you got abuse allegations and all this stuff, and they conduct an investigation and go, seems fine to us.
Ever Leach practice I
if you don't like it, you can probably go.
Yeah, spring of 19 is the first Leach practice I covered, and it was a sloppy first 10 minutes to practice, and Leach just stops the whole practice. He would restart practices all the time, which was yeah, and he was like, well, this looks like, I'm going to PG this up a little bit. This looks like an unmotivated group, and the thing I have found to motivate a football player is about 50 up downs. So figure it the out now.
that sounds pretty much exactly
out there.
like
it was probably a 35-degree day, and he's there in his cargo shorts, of course, and his t-shirt,
and
his ball cap, sunglasses on, just chilling.
I love it.
Eyes focused on one side of the field. Doesn't matter what's happening with the defense.
That's right.
We're watching the quarterbacks.
That's right.
All
right. Yeah, well, you win, and you can kind of do whatever you want, and nobody cares. But you better win.
Yep.
Otherwise, people seem to care a lot. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, hey, that is probably a good place to wrap it up. So, Jamie, why don't you remind everybody where they can find you on the socials?
Jamie Vinnick 9 on Twitter. JameyVinnick and the number 9. That's where I do most of my social mediaing and then all of my work at cougfan.com.
Yeah, go find kookfan.com. And you can find me on Blue Sky. That's where I hang out. Nusscoug, NUSSCOUG.podcastvseveryone.com. And again, you can always subscribe to the newsletter just by going to podcastversuseveryone.com and getting that sent to your inbox. And just a reminder again, join the premium, do a premium subscription, jump on into our Slack, talk with a whole bunch of other people who are just as psycho as you are about the Cougs. Join us for the NCAA basketball tournament. By the way, Jamie, as we're wrapping up here, who you got to win it all?
Go Gators.
Yeah, me too. I'm like, we got a big draft thing. It's a huge, complicated thing, but at my school tomorrow, and I'm hoping to draft the Gators because I gotta cheer for my boy, John Andershek, friend of the pod, John Andershek, for people who listened to those back in the day. So very, very excited. Him and Big Ruben out there in Gainesville. Yep. So hoping they'll win it. Although I don't know. I think Duke is really good. So
if Cooper Flag is
yeah, that's kind of anyway. Let's wrap it up. Jamie, Black Lives Matter. Go Cougs. I'm messing it all up already. Unions are awesome. All that good stuff.